welcome everybody to the February installment of our School Health Information and Nurse Education series. Thanks for bearing with us first and foremost through some of these technology challenges this morning. It looks like everyone actually might be getting in smoother with the direct login versus our normal process. So I'll kind of experiment with that in the future. But thank you so much for kind of troubleshooting with us and joining our session too. We took January off kind of just to give everybody a break as we get back to school after the holidays. So excited to be here February. And then just throughout the month, or the rest of the year, we'll have March, April, and May to round this series out. So especially just a reminder for those of you that have been here before to let you know for anybody that's new to Shine. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. There we go. Just a couple things to note. I did mention this a second ago. Please put your name, your role, and where you work in the chat. We're all so spread out across this gigantic state that kind of learning a little bit about each other helps us build this sense of community here. In our virtual world as well, if you feel comfortable doing so, we love to see your faces during these presentations. So if you feel comfortable, please turn your camera on, but just remember to stay on mute unless you're, please jump in if you've got questions or want to chat. But we love to see you. And then we'll start with this 20 to 30 minute presentation that is being recorded right now. At the conclusion of the presentation portion, I will stop the recording as we go into kind of our Q&A and discussion portion of Shine, because our hope is that you all feel the opportunity to speak freely. If you have questions about a certain student or parents or anything, we want you to speak openly and be able to use each other as a resource here. But please just remember, don't break any, HIPAA violations, anything about FERPA. Please, refrain from using specific student names and identifiers and just speak generally about the issue that you might be having. Following this session, there will be a QR code at the top. And as per some asks in the past, I will include a link in the chat. We do a post-session survey to learn about how did you guys feel this session went and what would you like to see in the future. And then in about a week after this session, I'll include the recording in a highlights email that'll also go over kind of key points and then the unrecorded Q&A session, as well as links to all of the key resources that we have for you as well. And then just super fast, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. Why on earth is this little organization called Montana Pediatrics putting on a school health and school-based program? Our mission is to increase access to healthcare for all children across Montana. And we recognize that in a lot of instances, especially in the more rural parts of our state, sometimes the only medical professional a student sees for a while is a school nurse. And a lot of schools don't have school nurses too. So we started a program about 2 years ago called Diabetes in School Health. We have expanded that program on request to include all sorts of different topics about supporting student health beyond and including students with type 1 diabetes as well. So there's a couple of our programs on the side. In just a minute, I'm going to pass it off to Chani Knight from our team to talk about some of our mental health work. But also on request from a lot of you here is quite literally on Monday, we just got approved through Montana's OPI to offer renewal units for eligible participants within Shine. So we did this in the past for continuing nursing education credits. That is something we might explore bringing back due to request as well. But now that this program's opened up to teachers and counselors and all sorts of school personnel, there are now OPI credits available for you as well. In order to receive those, you must attend the live session. Unfortunately, we're not able to offer those for the recorded portion, if you watch it on YouTube after. So you do have to attend the live session, complete the post-session survey. And then on that post-session survey, you'll see a new question that says, are you seeking OPI credits? If you want those, this seems obvious, please press yes. I will issue that certificate within about 7 to 10 days. It'll come directly to your email. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to me and bear with me. I'm doing my best to learn how to be an administrator of OPI credits at the same time. So again, though, this all came from requests from you all as participants. We're super happy to be able to do this. The program is built by school health personnel across Montana. We want to continue to do that. If you have any other recommendations for how to make Shine better, please let me know. All right, Chani Knight from our team. You can do your own brief little introduction, but I believe this is the first kind of public time we've really talked about this single digital intervention work, especially with this lovely audience of school-based folks. So take it away, Chani.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for the time. There are a few of you I see on the call that I may have touched base with personally about this as we've started rolling it out, but I'm very excited to kind of bring it to the table. So thanks for giving me just a few minutes here. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Chani Knight. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement here at Montana Pediatrics. I get the joy and honor of working on some of our fantastic projects across the state and many of our grant-funded projects and programs as well. So single digital interventions is one that has really come to light over the last year or so, and just over the last week or two, we actually are in a great position to be able to share it with Montana. So for those of you who aren't familiar, our current offerings range from like bridge therapy, filling in those gaps where wait times for appointments can be, many months out, brief interventions, longer term therapy options. But what that doesn't factor in are a lot of the youth and adolescents who might be exhibiting signs of needing mental health intervention, but they either don't have access to traditional professional resources, might have other barriers to care, or may not be in a position where they feel like it's, I hate to say, serious enough. As many youth just don't understand quite the depth and breadth of a lot of it yet. And we want them to still have those resources available to them. So that's where we found that gap for single digital interventions to be most beneficial. So what are they? They are think of them as mini activities. They're kind of self-led mental health moments and modules where youth can learn coping mechanisms, self-care activities, and more along those lines that can make a really big difference in anxiety, depression, stress, other common mental health struggles. They kind of serve as ways for youth to self-advocate, and it really pulls them away from using social media, finding videos that are not backed by anything, potentially giving advice that could be detrimental to them, and instead provides this platform for evidence-based, scientifically backed resources that have been proven so far through quite a few rounds of research with the Lab for Scalable Mental Health out of Northwestern University in Chicago. And they've shown to make marked differences even when they are used just one singular time. So right now, as you see on the screen, we're recruiting about 100 youth and adolescents in the state of Montana, ages 13 to 17, to participate in some asynchronous focus groups. So what that looks like is it's a span of about 4 to 6 weeks, but it's very much opt-in as much or as they want. And they will be compensated for the amount of participation. So if they're like, you know what, I want to give this a try, I want to give my feedback, and that ends up being, 1 week, and they're like, I'm not interested, we'll still compensate them for their time. We want to make sure that they are giving their voices and being heard and being the ones that are truly a part of this solution that we plan to bring to the table. The full adoption of these won't come to fruition until 2026, but we want to start with, our Montana Peds mission to always lead any program or project that we bring to the table with the voices of the people who the work is for. So we'll send a highlight email out next week, as Kate always does, that will recap this session. And in that, we'll make sure to include kind of the flyers and information about it. I'm happy to provide my email if anyone has immediate questions, but we're really excited about this work. We're excited that we'll be given an opportunity to give youth and adolescents a little bit more advocacy for themselves and some tools for success. And we look forward to hearing what they think of it. And if you have any thoughts, we look forward to hearing what you think about it too.
Thanks, Chani.
Short and sweet.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I will also, Chani, include your contact information directly in that highlights email too, so people can reach out to you specifically with any additional questions or anything like that. So thank you for that. And then at this point, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Deming Annie Deming is originally from Laurel. My favorite thing is when I get bios is it says Laurel, Montana, and I'm always like, do I say Montana again? Even though everybody here is from Montana. But because she lives in Utah now, but she is one of our Montana girls at heart. I will extra mention. She's from Laurel and majored in psychology at the University of Montana. Go Grizz. I know from the last session, there were a lot of Grizz fans on here. And then she earned her doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of Alabama in 2009. She's been a licensed psychologist in the state of Utah since 2010, which became her home after being matched for a psychology internship at Primary Children's Hospital for safe and healthy families. This is a huge, incredible bio. I'll include it again in our post-session highlights. But I just wanted to give a brief little background on her. She's amazing, and the couple of times I've been able to chat with her so far, we're very lucky to have her bring Intermountain to the table, another one of our awesome healthcare partners here in Montana. And take it away, Dr. Deming. I'm going to put myself on mute.
Thanks so much, Kate, for that really nice introduction. I'm so excited to do this presentation because, like Kate said, I am a Montana girl at heart, even though I haven't lived there since 2003. So it's been a minute, but I'm happy to be back here, at least virtually. I'm very excited to talk to you all today. Okay, so I really wanted to formulate this presentation around really some practical things that you all could do in the school to both kind of recognize mental health concerns and challenges, how to intervene in a way that might be helpful in the school setting, and then also how to know when to like find other resources outside of the school. All right, yep, that's me. You don't need to do your picture. You have me, and you have me sort of live right now. Okay, so signs of mental health concerns are really variable. I think that's the challenge when we're really talking about how to identify mental health concerns, is because they present differently in all people. But these are really common things that we might see. So significant changes in behavior that I might sound like a broken record a little bit as we move through the presentation, because a change in behavior is like a high sign that something might be happening. We also might be seeing extreme mood swings, just lots of ups and downs. And this is hard because that's normal. Kids do have moodiness. And certainly as they become teenagers, we even see that become more dramatic. But mood swings that are really noticeable in the school setting would be a sign that there might be something more going on than just maybe some moodiness. Hyperactivity and distractibility, of course, is a sign. Classically, we think of that when we think of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It doesn't always present that way, but certainly that's kind of a common sign of that condition. So observing that, and again, this is hard because some of this is developmentally typical. A kindergartner is not going to be able to sit still for very long, but by the time you're in middle school and high school, you really should be able to persist on things. So you also have to think about kind of development as you're considering these signs. Also, tearfulness. Oftentimes, there's some embarrassment when someone cries in school, and so that can be a real big sign that they just maybe are struggling with managing their emotions. And then certainly irritability. Isolation and withdrawal can look different in all kids. Sometimes it is kids who really are not wanting to talk. Otherwise, it's kids who might have been social and really engaging and then have, again, that behavior change and that has become withdrawn. So that's definitely a challenge to notice. And then frequent absences. As people who work in education, you guys know that absences is a big sign that something might be going on and something to intervene with, but it can also be a signal for mental health concerns. All right. Poor hygiene, certainly we all have kind of different levels of comfort and how we present in public settings and school settings. But the key to look out for is a change in hygiene. So maybe a kiddo who really did present, with very clean clothes and clean hair, and then all of a sudden that has changed. That's definitely a signal. We often see this in teenagers. Teenagers become a bit more aware of their appearance. And so if they've previously been presenting in a certain way, like for females, wearing a lot of makeup, well, not a lot, but just like makeup, wanting to look a certain way, and then you see a vast change in how they're presenting physically, that can be a signal. Also expressing worries, really stating that, this is something I'm concerned about. This is what I'm fearing. Acting fearful, acting guarded, sadness, anger. Bullying is certainly difficult because oftentimes we want that behavior to stop, but often it's a signal that something else is going on internally with that kiddo. Same with aggressive behavior and argumentativeness. So this does really kind of, so in mental health, we often categorize symptoms of behavior into internalizing and externalizing. So externalizing behaviors are things that we can see. So argumentativeness, aggressive behavior, bullying, maybe refusal to do work. All of those things are considered more externalizing. We can observe them. And then we have internalizing, which is where, kids turn inward. So their emotional experiences internally might be really painful, very sad, anxiety, but that's not necessarily as expressed. So we often see both or either or in mental health conditions. And so that can be really hard to categorize. But that key piece to really take away is a change in behavior to really monitor and look out for. Okay, so what we might see at school, because school is such a structured environment, we don't necessarily observe the same things that we would if we see a kiddo in an office or we're in their home supporting them. We might see some different things. So at school, some classic things to really watch out for are eating alone. That can be quite sad for kids, and that can indicate that they're struggling socially. It can also indicate that they might be withdrawing or isolating. Also not turning in work. And of course, that can be challenging generally for some kiddos, especially again, if there's a change, you really want to monitor how they're really academically progressing, because academics and emotional well-being and health are really intertwined. Long sleeves all the time is a really concrete signal, and it doesn't always mean that something's going on, but it's not uncommon to see kiddos who might be engaging in self-harming behaviors wear long sleeves regardless of the weather. Another thing that we often see here in Utah is just bracelets up and down the arms. And again, it doesn't always mean that, because sometimes kids just like jewelry and that's fine. But that's just a signal to watch out for. If you're seeing someone wear long sleeves all the time, like bracelets all the time, it might be something to say, oh, I wonder if something's more going on. And then disengagement with classwork. This is a bit different than not turning in your work. Everyone kind of misses an assignment here and there. But really just this disengagement, not being interested in class activities, not being interested in learning, just that lack of participation. Changing friend groups unexpectedly, again, is a challenging one. So I have one daughter in high school, and then I have a son in middle school and a kindergartner. And so, it seems like in middle school especially, friend groups really kind of morph and change, and there's lots of ups and downs in that social scene. But it's something to really watch out for, because it can be really painful. When kids are struggling either with their mental health or socially or both, they really might be bouncing kind of from one group to the next. They might be rejected by one group and accepted by one group. So that's something to watch out for in the school setting that you guys can notice. Also neglect by peers. So oftentimes, kids kind of fall into these groups as far as popular versus not popular versus, kids who might be kind of friends to everybody, right? We have some categories that we're noticing in the school setting. But there is research showing that kids who are rejected and neglected by peers actually have significant mental health concerns, and it's a really painful experience. So if you see kids who, again, are eating alone, who just are walking alone on the playground or, in the hallways, aren't talking to anybody, those are the kids to maybe pay special attention to and check in and make sure that they're okay. Panic symptoms and avoidant behaviors also might present at school. So, kids leaving the classroom or spending a lot of time in the bathroom, avoiding hard, difficult work, kind of saying things like, I can't do this, I'm too nervous, or behaving that way. That can be a signal that is noticeable. And then, of course, aggressive and bullying behaviors. That's just one that really tends to get a lot of attention. And again, sometimes it's really difficult to look past that behavior, because the behavior does really need to stop, but there's almost always something driving it. So kind of digging deeper and figuring out really what's going on for that kid can help the bullying behaviors be addressed in a different way. All right. So some good practical strategies for communication that I wanted to talk about. So, I think there's an important concept link between how do you just create a healthy school environment and how do you support mental health? And those do really go hand in hand. So we really want to recognize the key role that the school environment plays within the community and within the child's life. So kids spend, the majority of their waking hours at school, through their growing up years. And coming from a small town myself, the schools were really the center of the community. We were always into sports. We were always doing activities at the school. The high school in my town was kind of like a community center. We had non-school activities there. And so there was a lot of community pride and connection to the schools. And so I think leveraging that, especially in our rural areas, is super important. Really being able to kind of put the schools as that leader of the community so that we can show our kids that it's good to talk about emotions. It's good to talk about wellness. It's important to feel connected, as a student in your school, as a child in this community. So just really kind of stepping into that role, I think is a helpful thing for schools to do. We also want to focus on the whole child in the school setting. And when I talk to educators and people who work in schools, they're like, yeah, we do that all the time. And you're right, you do. I think sometimes if we focus on, okay, what are these categories, you can really try to balance either teaching or administrative policies and procedures, nursing approaches to all of this. So cognitively, so my dad was an educator in Laurel schools for years and years, and he said all the time, it's not my job to teach kids what to think, it's my job to teach them how to think, right? How to be critical thinkers and how to move through problem solving. So cognitively, you're really focusing on a process of how do we approach things as people, how do we understand our environment? How do we understand our world and how we fit in? And so that's this approach of like cognitive development. Let's help our kids learn how to think, not only what to think. And then the academics are really focused on really learning specific strategies to approach different things. And that is not my area. I'm not an educator. So people on this call are probably a lot better at that than I am. But it's only one part of what schools really do for children. And then the social piece, how do we be good friends? How do we have empathy for others? How do we communicate that empathy? Also, how do we set boundaries? That's a really important thing that schools have an opportunity to teach as well. How do we say to a friend, hey, I don't like what you're doing and I need to just kind of take a break for a while? And teaching those things and modeling those things within the school environment can be really powerful. And then psychologically, how do we help kids understand who they are? So fostering self-awareness, fostering identity development, being able to state, positive characteristics and areas for growth. My son had his parent-teacher conference yesterday, my kindergartner, and his teacher offered a glow, which was a reinforcement, something she notices that he does well, and then a grow, what she wants him to work on. And they were very concrete and developmentally appropriate. And so just this idea of psychological health, how do we help kids identify that self-awareness so they know what to foster and then also what to work on? And then emotionally, how do we really set our school up to be successful, to help everybody be comfortable with emotions and be really emotionally literate? So some specific things here that I would highly recommend is modeling. So it's awesome when teachers or school nurses or counselors are able to say, wow, I'm kind of feeling frustrated right now, and I'm going to take a minute, take some deep breaths, and then I'll return to what we're doing. So being able to model that healthy emotion identification, doing something about it, and then going back to the activity, getting back to what the responsibility was and what we need to be doing. Schools also, as an environment, have an opportunity to really be inclusive. So all students are welcomed, all students are supported and empowered to succeed. And this can happen both directly and indirectly. So some indirect ways, are just artwork on the walls, being really inclusive, having just this kind of set standard in your school that everybody is welcome and valued. We might all be different, we might all look different, have different traditions and different family backgrounds, but we are all welcome here and we are all accepted here. All right, so more about the overall school environment. So these recommendations are based on an article, and I can share the reference, and Kate can send it out. It's a great article that really talks about kind of a framework for how do we support emotional wellness in the school setting. And it involves these things. So mental health curricula is one thing. So oftentimes this is done in health classes, but it can be developmentally matched to wherever setting and whatever age you're working with. So with young kids, play opportunities and opportunities to explore arts and feel good with experiential opportunities is important. That's mental health, right? Mental wellness is so broad, and just having opportunities to do things and enjoy your life is a mental health curricula. And then there's obviously more concrete specifics, such as in health classes, about different diagnoses, different symptoms, where to recognize that you might need a mental health resource. Those are more concrete, but overall, just curricula to support wellness and this idea that emotional health is important. Early identification and intervention, the SHINE program is really contributing to this. So helping everybody learn more about how to recognize mental illnesses in students and how they might present. And then being able to connect to resources. And that is definitely harder in rural settings, but we have lots of great online resources that can be utilized. And these are growing all the time, just like Chandi mentioned at the beginning. And then also promoting partnerships with local experts. Again, SHINE is supporting this. And then being conversant and open about mental health. This is so important because it helps reduce stigma. Stigma is still a huge problem in our mental health world. Even our own mental health providers sometimes have stigma with mental health. So if we're able to just make this kind of part of our vernacular in the school setting. Some people have physical illnesses, some people have mental illnesses, and these are also linked. Like just being able to state that and acknowledge that can go a long way in helping normalize this as something that we are facing as a society. Okay, so some specific classroom recommendations, and it doesn't necessarily have to only be classroom, but I do believe it's important for school personnel to participate in mental health training. But don't feel like you need to be a mental health therapist. I think that is a hard line or an easy line to cross, and it can be stressful. Teachers and school personnel already have a lot of roles they have to play, a lot of hats they have to put on throughout the day, and it's all hard. And again, my dad is an educator. I remember him telling stories about, I had to do this today, I had to do that today, and it was never being only, someone lecturing, right? That's not what teaching is. That's not what education is. So make sure that you step into your training and understanding, but also know when it's okay to say, this is kind of out of my realm and I need more resource and I need to connect the student to something outside the school. The relationship between school personnel, whether that's teacher or nurse or principal, with the students is key. So that's true in our setting as well. So if you're seeing a therapist and you don't connect with them, you're just not going to get better. You need to have a therapist that you feel safe with. And teachers and school personnel also need to focus on that relationship. And that's true in parenting as well. As long as we have a good foundation and we can meet that child where they're at, as far as like, wow, it seems like you're having a really hard time and I care and I want to figure out how to help you. How do we do this? So that relationship is the foundation of everything is important. And relationships amongst school personnel within a school is also important. If the administration and the teachers and the nurses and the counselors all get along, it doesn't have to happen all the time, right? That's impossible. But get along and value each other, show respect for each other, even in disagreement, that will trickle down to how the students work together and understand their role in the school. Good teaching skills are the right thing to do. So lean on your teacher training and your educator training. So having good structure, clear expectations, incentives and consequences that are predictable, and having a nurturing and warm environment all is going to foster emotional wellness and health and allow the opportunity for kids to really express, hey, there's something going on and I need help. Also modeling that emotion identification and regulation. I talked about that a little bit earlier. Being able to say, well, I'm really struggling and I need to take a break. And that's very appropriate. There's also some recommendations for kind of safe spaces and opportunities to express feelings in school. Again, going back to that, don't feel like you need to be a therapist. This would be best done by a mental health professional. But if you do have access to a mental health professional within your setting, you can certainly kind of set up almost like open houses, so that mental health professional can be accessed by students who are struggling. Just this idea of like, okay, if you're struggling, there's a safe space, you can go talk to somebody. All right. And sorry, the classroom recommendations title in here isn't accurate, but I want to talk practically about some communication strategies. So these are just good things to do kind of in all relationships. And as therapists, we take lots of classes related to these skills. So don't feel like you need to necessarily be a therapist to do these things. These are just good communication strategies. So it starts with reflection of feelings. So that sounds simple, but it can be complicated at times. So if a student or coworker is expressing something to you, something that they experienced that either was happy and enjoyable versus something that was difficult or challenging, you can say things like, "Wow, it sounds like you felt really joyful during the time the Grizz won the football game," or whatever it might be. You can really label the emotion that you're hearing, even if they're not saying it. And that's a great skill to increase emotional literacy and make emotional language kind of normal in conversations. The next level is validation of feelings. So reflection is really just labeling and kind of saying, okay, this is what I'm hearing from what you're saying. Validation is a step further than that. It's saying, I understand why you felt that way in that moment. So I'll use football as an example. So yes, I've been to really good football schools. So the University of Montana is a great football school. And then the University of Alabama is an amazing football school. So I was not happy this year because Alabama did not make it to the college football playoff. And I had a lot of friends call me and check in with me about that. They're like, gosh, you must be so disappointed. So they were reflecting my feelings. And then they said things like, it makes so much sense. You follow Alabama football religiously. I'm sure you were so upset. And it makes sense that you felt that way. So they're letting me know that my feelings made sense in the situation. They don't have to agree. Lots of my friends don't care about Alabama football. So they don't have to have the same feeling to validate me, but they can let me know, we get it. We get where you're coming from. So those two skills are super important. And then asking questions. So there's a way to ask questions to kind of elicit more information. Yes and no questions are not super great to elicit more information, but questions that are more open-ended, like, wow, thank you so much for sharing that with me. How did you feel when that happened? Or help me understand what you were experiencing in that moment, so that you're kind of broadening the ability for those kiddos to express what they went through. And then responding. So this one is important. As we're working through stigma on mental health, it's a lack of response oftentimes that people get. If students are expressing that they're struggling, or they're expressing that something happened that they felt uncomfortable with, sometimes it's really easy to just kind of say, it'll go away, right, over time. And you don't necessarily step into a conversation about it, or you don't necessarily acknowledge that something happened. And this is easy to do because it can be scary to kind of step into someone's experience when they're really struggling. But even a small response, something along the lines of, wow, I'm so sorry. I don't really know what to say, but let's figure out what to do and who I can connect you with to help you. That's so good to do. It's much better than kind of saying, I don't really know how to talk about this, and then shutting it down. Just keep those open lines of communication and actually have a response. Even if you think it's the wrong one, responding with a wrong response is better than not responding at all. So make sure there's that kind of closing the loop.